The road into Devon snaked beneath a pale, cloud-smudged sky, mist curling over the green slopes and stony hedgerows like restless memories. In the rumble of a hired lorry, Noah Lennox pressed his forehead to the cool glass and watched the world shift from town to country, each mile drawing him deeper into a landscape he'd only ever heard about in letters. The map he held was smudged, corners worn, but he'd memorized every turn. Clara, his mother, had once described fields thick with heather, the restless edge of Exmoor, and at the heart of it all, Wrenmoor Hall. Noah's boots hit gravel when the truck stopped by iron gates carved with a rampant stallion. Mrs. Edith Baines, iron-haired and sharp-eyed, climbed out beside him. She gave the driver a polite nod, then turned to Noah with an expression that was neither cold nor warm, but expectant, like a judge weighing evidence. "Well, here we are," she said, her accent clipped as the morning air. "Best gather your things. Sir Alistair expects punctuality." Noah nodded, shoulders squared. He swung his duffel bag over one shoulder, feeling the familiar ache of nerves settle deep in his stomach. The estate beyond the gate stretched into a tapestry of moorland and woods, with a great stone manor rising against the horizon. Crows wheeled above the stables, and somewhere far off, the echo of a horse's cry rose through the damp air. They crossed the drive, boots crunching, when a commotion drew Noah's attention. A group of workers, men in yellow vests, mud-stained and tense, were stringing a fresh electric fence across the meadow bordering the estate. The wire crackled as it went taut. One man barked instructions, waving his arm as if to ward off trouble. Trouble, it turned out, came on four hooves. Out of the fog galloped a black stallion, muscles rippling beneath a dark, rain-sheened coat. His mane flew like a flag, nostrils flared. The horse charged the new fence, rearing up just feet from the men. His screams split the quiet, raw and wild. The workers dropped their tools and scattered, swearing. Even from a distance, Noah could see the whites of the animal's eyes, full of warning, not madness. From the manor's upper balcony, a figure stood watching. Sir Alistair Pembroke, rigid, silver-haired, wrapped in a heavy coat, his hands folded on the cold railing like a general overseeing a battle. He called down in a voice that cut the air. "Keep your distance from that beast. Do not provoke it. Baines, get the boy away from the fence." But Noah, driven by a pull he couldn't explain, stepped away from Mrs. Baines and moved closer. Every instinct from a childhood spent among Exmoor ponies screamed caution, yet something about the stallion's stance, the set of his ears, was familiar. The black horse pawed at the ground, threatening, but not attacking. Noah stopped 10 paces from the fence, hands visible, shoulders loose. He knelt, lowering his body in the wet grass, and waited. The men muttered, some reaching for sticks or rocks. The stallion's ears flicked. Fear, anger, confusion. Noah slowly extended his arm, palm out, letting the scent of hay and clover drift from his sleeve. "Let him be, he'll trample you." One of the workers shouted, but Noah barely heard. His world narrowed to the rhythm of the horse's breath, the dark intelligence in those wild eyes. The stallion took a step, then another, massive hooves sinking into the turf. Each muscle in Noah's body tensed. One more wrong move, and this would end in panic or blood. Then, just as the stallion's nostrils flared over Noah's hand, a shiver passed through the animal. The wildness faded, replaced by wary curiosity. The stallion's hot breath washed over Noah's knuckles. For a heartbeat, time held still, boy and horse, ancient kinship humming in the mist. The horse dipped his head, bumping Noah's hand, and snorted, as if to say, "You belong here." Up on the balcony, Sir Alistair's face froze, a mix of disbelief and something sharper, edged with memory and regret. Mrs. Baines exhaled. "That's Raven," she murmured, almost to herself. "No one gets that close. Not since your father." Noah stood slowly. Raven tossed his head, flicked his tail, and with one final look, spun and cantered back toward the open moor. The workers muttered, shaken, glancing at Noah with a new kind of respect and suspicion. Behind him, Sir Alistair's cold gaze settled on the newcomer. Noah felt the weight of it, an ancient tension stretching between generations. Here, family history was not just blood and name. It was battle lines drawn across fields, wounds that never quite healed. Inside, Sir Alistair called. "We have business to discuss." His eyes flicked to Noah, unreadable. "We'll start in the stables. Mrs. Baines will see to your quarters. And keep out of trouble." As they crossed the courtyard, Mrs. Baines leaned in just enough for Noah to hear. "He's not one for welcomes. Don't let it put you off. Wrenmoor's walls remember more than they let on." Noah followed, glancing back once toward the meadow where Raven now grazed, a shadow among the morning mist. The electric fence sparked quietly, a warning to all who dared cross boundaries, human or beast. Above, storm clouds gathered, promising that peace, like trust, would be hard-won on these ancient lands. Inside the hall, the scent of old wood and rain-damp stone wrapped around him. He paused, hand on the banister, listening for footsteps, for voices from the past. He was a stranger in his own story, yet something deep inside whispered that he'd just set foot on ground where fate, forgiveness, and danger would soon collide. The day was only beginning, and already the old order was shifting. Out there, beyond the fence, the black stallion watched and waited. And inside, old secrets stirred awake, restless as the wind on the moor. The air over Wrenmoor was thick with a restless hush as Noah rose the next morning, dew clinging to the grass and every breath tasting of wet stone and distant heather. He followed Mrs. Baines through the echoing halls, down the servants' staircase, and out into the stable yard where dawn light broke in streaks across the slate roofs and stone walls. Reese Pritchard, the head groom, waited near the paddock fence, a broad-shouldered Welshman with hands rough as barnwood and eyes that never missed a detail. "Got your boots? Good. I'll show you what needs doing," Reese said, his voice quiet but not unkind. He handed Noah a battered pitchfork and gestured toward the mare's pasture. "Keep your wits. There's more going on here than mucking stalls." They walked the perimeter, boots squelching through the damp earth, when a sudden whinny split the air. Near the far fence, one of the Exmoor mares limped, her coat brushed with mud and sweat. Noah's heart caught as he crouched beside her, running his hands gently down the trembling leg. A deep cut, raw and red, slashed just above the fetlock, a wound that could only have come from wire. Reese knelt beside him, frowning. "That's no bramble," he muttered. "That's a wire mark, fresh. They've put up new fencing overnight, pushing the herd out." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Some of the men think the wild ones are dangerous, but I know these mares. They don't spook for nothing." Noah studied the wound, jaw set. His mind raced with old lessons from his mother. How to read a horse's pain, how to see what others missed. He followed the line of the fence, scanning for any sign of what had happened. Then, glinting half-buried in the mud near a flattened clump of grass, he found it, a shard of black plastic, thin and curved like a broken blade. He turned it in his fingers, brushing off muck. It was the shattered tip of a drone's propeller. Reese's face darkened as he examined the piece. "Damn it," he growled. "They've been running drones over the moor to herd the wild ones, trying to force them into trouble. That's how she got hurt." Before Noah could answer, the distant crackle of a radio and the sharp sound of shouting drifted from the far side of the field. Two men in dark uniforms, private security, not local police, were setting up a device near the trees. One of them held a small black box, pressing a button. A piercing, high-pitched whistle tore through the air, sending every bird in the branches wheeling skyward. Raven and the rest of the wild herd were grazing near the tree line. The moment the noise hit, they jerked their heads up, ears pinned, and stampeded away from the sound. The foals scattered, one nearly tumbling as it tried to keep pace. Raven spun, placing himself between the men and the youngest colt, muscles taut with fury and fear. Noah's anger surged. He sprinted across the field, Reese close behind. The security men, focused on their device, barely noticed until Noah shouted. "Turn that thing off," he yelled, voice raw. The men ignored him, turning the frequency even higher. The air shimmered with pain. Without thinking, Noah lunged and slammed his palm down on the black box, wrenching it from the man's hand. The whistle died mid-screech. Raven, still shaking, planted himself squarely before the smallest colt, a living shield. The taller guard grabbed Noah's arm. "What do you think you're doing? This is private property. Orders from management, these wild horses are a hazard." Reese stepped forward, his Welsh lilt suddenly sharp. "You want a hazard, mate? Keep poking at a wild stallion and see what you get." His glare was enough to freeze the man in place. Raven's eyes, wild and blood-bright, flicked from Noah to the men, then to the trembling colt at his side. For a moment, time hung by a thread. Noah met the stallion's gaze, urging calm without words. Slowly, Raven's breath eased. He dipped his head, nuzzling the colt, then nudged the foal back toward the herd. The security team, shaken, retreated with their broken device. Reese and Noah exchanged a look, relief, but also dread. As the field quieted, Reese spoke low, his words heavy with warning. "They're building a case. Trying to prove these horses are dangerous, unmanageable. That's why the drones, the wires, the stunts like today. Someone's pulling strings. Noah nodded. His fingers tightened on the shard of drone blade. They want to get rid of the herd. Make it look like the only option. Back at the stables, Reese let Noah tend to the injured mare. He washed the cut, binding it with linen and a practice hand, all the while feeling the eyes of the estate, workers, staff, even the silent weight of the manor itself, watching, judging. Mrs. Baines appeared in the doorway, her face troubled. "I saw what happened," she said quietly. "Sir Alistair's not aware, yet. But there are forces here who care less for living creatures than for contracts. You should keep your wits about you, Mr. Lennox." Noah looked past her, to where Raven and his herd stood silhouetted against the rising sun. He felt a surge of protectiveness, fierce and sudden. These horses, wild and misunderstood, were fighting for survival on ground that seemed to shift beneath them every day. As the day drew on, Noah found himself near the marsh's edge, the broken drone propeller still in his pocket. He stared out over the reeds and wine-tossed grasses, feeling the heavy shadow of what was to come. Somewhere in the house, a meeting was taking place, one he was not invited to, but whose outcome would shape the future for every living thing at Wrenmoor. That night, as mist closed over the fields and the air thrummed with unspoken threats, Noah wrote in his battered notebook, a record not just of wounds and wire, but of the courage and cruelty that lives side by side on these ancient moors. He could not shake the image of Raven, standing guard over the trembling foal, fierce but not cruel. It was not savagery, but love. In the darkness, Noah promised himself he would not let these horses be driven from their home, no matter the cost. Evening draped itself over Wrenmoor Hall like a heavy, moth-eaten cloak. The last of the light curled around the oak woods and faded from the paddocks, leaving only the sharp call of an owl and the distant, unsettled stamp of hooves. Noah moved quietly through the main corridor, the thick rugs muffling his steps as he searched for a quiet corner to gather his thoughts. The events of the day played over in his mind: wounded mares, shadowy security, the cold calculation in unfamiliar eyes. He found himself pausing at the great carved doors of Sir Alistair's study. The room was lined with oak panels, their dark grain gleaming with polish, the walls crowded with paintings of proud men and powerful horses, the Pembroke crest hanging above a stone fireplace. Books filled every shelf, interrupted only by trophies and medals from a life spent on horseback. It smelled of leather and pipe smoke, of tradition and judgment. Inside, Sir Alistair sat behind a vast desk, a letter opener glinting between his fingers. His eyes were lost in the flickering fire, but at the sound of Noah's hesitant knock, he looked up, sharp, assessing, impatient. Mrs. Baines stood by the window, arms folded, her posture tight. She called Noah here for a reason, and the atmosphere in the room was as brittle as thin ice. "Sit down, Noah," she said quietly. "There are things you need to know." Sir Alistair glanced at her, something icy flickering in his gaze. "You brought him here for this." Mrs. Baines didn't flinch. "He deserves the truth, Alistair." Noah sat, feeling out of place in the heavy wooden chair, the Lennox name echoing in his head like a bell. He looked at the portrait above the fireplace, his mother, Clara, painted as a young woman, her eyes clear and defiant. The resemblance was sharp enough to draw blood. Sir Alistair cleared his throat, his words measured. "I suppose Mrs. Baines has told you who I am to this house. And perhaps, what happened between myself and your parents." Noah's jaw clenched. He'd heard fragments, half-stories whispered by his mother when the wind rattled the old windows back home. Sir Alistair continued, each word dropped with a weight that filled the room. "Your father, Evan Lennox, was a good horseman, but not of this world. I forbade the match. I was wrong. Clara left. I lost a daughter, and Wrenmoor lost its peace." He looked away, as if staring into a storm only he could see. 15 years. You're the first Lennox to set foot here since. The air in the room shifted, guilt, regret, the ache of years lost to stubborn pride. Noah stared at the floor, his fists tight in his lap. He'd spent his life hearing about Pembroke pride and Lennox stubbornness, the way old grudges could twist a family until no one remembered how it started. Mrs. Baines broke the silence, her voice gentle. "Noah is Clara's son. Evan's boy. He's here now, and there's work to do." Sir Alistair's mask faltered. For a heartbeat, something like pain passed through his eyes. "You have your mother's look," he muttered, almost to himself. "And your father's way with horses." Noah didn't know how to answer. He wanted to shout, to demand why it all had to be this way, fathers losing daughters, sons growing up with ghosts. But instead, he kept his voice steady. "I'm not here for the past. I'm here because the herd is in danger. Raven, the others, they'll be gone if we don't do something." Sir Alistair looked at him for a long moment, then back at Mrs. Baines. "Very well. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what's to be done. Tonight, rest. Edith, show him to the old nursery." As Noah left, Mrs. Baines paused beside him. "Don't judge him too harshly. The years weigh on all of us." He nodded, following her down twisting halls, past faded wallpaper and locked doors. The nursery was small, tucked beneath the eaves, with a dormer window that looked out over the rolling moor. He dropped his bag on the narrow bed and sat, listening to the night. But Noah couldn't rest. When the house grew quiet, he slipped outside, notebook in hand. The air was thick with mist, silvering the fields and stables. From the shadows, Raven watched him, eyes catching the moonlight. Noah scribbled observations: Raven's limp, the way the foals stuck close, the tension that ran through the herd since the wires and drones appeared. A flicker of light in an upstairs window caught his eye. Sir Alistair, silhouetted against the glass, watching him as his father once had watched wild horses from the edge of the moor. There was loneliness in that outline, and something like longing. Noah wrote late into the night, sketching the shape of Raven's herd, listing the injuries, the strange events. In the margin, he scribbled one word: why? He remembered Clara's voice as she brushed his hair by the fire, telling him of her childhood, sneaking out to the stables at dawn, feeding apples to the colts, running races against the wind. She had never spoken of Sir Alistair with anything but sorrow and defiance. Still, Noah felt something stir beneath the surface, an old question scratching for light. He slept little, dreams crowded with the thunder of hooves and the snap of wire. When the first hint of daylight crept over the moor, he was already at the window, watching Raven graze with the herd, always on guard, always waiting for trouble. In that silent moment, Noah understood the horse, a creature shaped by loss and vigilance, loyal to his own, unwilling to trust but quick to protect. Back in the main house, Sir Alistair stood alone in his study, a letter from Clara open before him, hands trembling as he traced her handwriting. Outside, the past and future circled each other like wary dogs, neither willing to yield. A storm was coming to Wrenmoor, and every soul in the old estate, man, beast, and memory alike, could feel the ground begin to shake. The next morning, a low mist crawled over the moors, softening the hard lines of stone walls and trees into uncertain shapes. Noah rose before dawn, compelled by a restlessness he couldn't name. The house was silent except for the muffled creaks of old beams settling. He left a note for Mrs. Baines and slipped outside, the chill air stinging his face as he made his way across the dew-soaked grass toward the stables. The Exmoor herd was already grazing along the edge of the wetlands, Raven standing apart, watchful as always. Noah opened the old gate, careful not to startle the horses. Raven's ears twitched as Noah approached, but he did not bolt. Instead, the stallion seemed to study Noah, weighing the intent behind every step. A crow cawed overhead. The mist thickened as Noah followed the herd along a narrow, barely visible trail leading off the main pasture. He hadn't planned to stray far, but Raven flicked his tail and began walking toward the wilder reaches of the estate, past the stone fences and into the tangled heather. Noah hesitated only a moment before following, boots sinking into sodden earth. The trail led across a shallow stream and up a low, rocky rise. Brambles scratched at Noah's legs, and for a moment he lost sight of the stallion in the shifting fog. He almost turned back, unsure if he was trespassing into territory meant only for the wild herd. But then he spotted Raven's dark shape waiting at the crest of a ridge, framed by the pale sky. Noah caught up, his breath misting. The stallion gave a short, impatient snort, then plunged down a barely discernible path that wound into a narrow, sheltered valley, a coombe hidden from the house and road, tucked away like a secret. The air grew still, heavy with the scent of wet grass and moss. Here, the world was quiet, muffled, as if set apart from time. In the heart of the coombe, Noah saw a shepherd's hut, an old, weathered wooden structure, its roof patched with moss and tin, tucked beneath a gnarled oak. He paused, surprise blooming in his chest. He'd heard stories of such huts from his mother, but he'd never expected to find one so deep in Wrenmoor's lands. Raven paused near the hut, pawing the ground, then moved off to graze. Noah approached the hut, curiosity rising. The door creaked on its hinges as he pushed it open, half expecting to find it abandoned. Instead, dust motes danced in the slanting light from a cracked window. Inside, the hut felt almost lived in. A stack of field journals and books lay on a small table, a faded wool blanket draped over a bench, a tin kettle resting on the old iron stove. On the shelf above the table were photographs, black and white images of Exmoor ponies racing across open fields, a young woman standing with her hand resting on a stallion's neck, her smile fierce and proud. Clara. Noah's heart thudded in his chest as he reached for the pictures, the faces so familiar it ached. He sat on the bench, fingers trembling as he sifted through the stack. There were notes in the margins, little sketches of horses, pressed wildflowers tucked between pages. Beneath a pile of books, he found a bundle of letters tied with faded string. The envelopes were addressed in his mother's looping hand, all stamped for Wrenmoor Hall. Some were torn, their seals never broken. Others were marked undeliverable, the edges browned with age. Noah opened the top letter. The words inside spilled out like rain. "I hope you read this, Papa. I hope you understand, even after all these years, why I had to go. Evan loves me, but the world is not kind to a girl who loves too much, or a boy who comes from nothing. I see you in Noah's eyes every day. I wish he could know you." He read every letter, piecing together the lost years, a daughter reaching for her father, never answered, never welcomed home. Some letters were just a few lines, others whole pages of longing and regret. One envelope, thicker than the rest, held a photograph of Clara and Evan, arms around each other, both beaming, with a shaggy fold between them. Noah pressed the photo to his chest, swallowing the ache that rose in his throat. The hut held more than just memories. In the bench's storage compartment, he found a worn canvas pouch filled with old coins, a broken pocket watch, and a sealed packet with the Pembroke crest. Inside, a sheaf of documents, official, yellowed with age, all bearing his grandmother's name. Each paper referenced Wrenmoor West Paddocks and, in careful handwriting, noted that the property was to be entrusted to the first grandchild of Clara Pembroke upon coming of age. Noah sat back, thunderstruck. The implication was staggering. He was not just a stranger on the estate; by the terms of this trust, he was the legal heir to part of Wrenmoor itself. A tremor of possibility ran through him, mingled with fear. Was this why the letters never reached Sir Alistair? Had someone kept them hidden to protect the estate, or to keep Clara and her son at a distance forever? He felt a chill as the mist thickened, wrapping the coombe in secrecy. As he packed the letters and documents into his satchel, a branch cracked outside. Raven stood in the doorway, eyes reflecting a quiet, knowing patience. Noah brushed past the stallion, one hand on his warm neck, grateful for the silent company. As he climbed back toward the main fields, the sun finally broke through, turning the mist to gold. Every step felt different now, the burden of loneliness replaced by a strange, dangerous hope. He didn't know how Sir Alistair would react, or if the truth would matter to those already determined to drive the herd away. But for the first time since arriving at Wrenmoor, Noah felt something other than loss. He had found the proof his mother had left behind. He had found her voice. And as the herd appeared out of the mist to greet him, he felt the old order of the moors shift, just a little, just enough to let hope slip through. Rain swept over Wrenmoor Hall, battering the tall windows and tracing thin rivers down the ancient glass. Inside, a hush gripped the house. Noah sat at the edge of his bed in the old nursery, the bundle of letters and legal papers heavy in his lap. All day, the truth gnawed at him, the letters never delivered, the trust, the possibility that for years, both he and his mother had been exiled from a place that was, by right, theirs. Mrs. Baines found him before breakfast, her expression set and determined. She barely glanced at the thunder rolling beyond the windows. "Get your boots, Noah. Sir Alistair is waiting in the sword room. Bring what you found." Her words left no room for debate. Noah moved through the hallways, clutching the evidence. The sword room was a place reserved for ceremony and legacy, its walls lined with gleaming blades, pennants, and hunting trophies that whispered of victories and mistakes long buried. The fireplace crackled, throwing light onto Sir Alistair, who stood by the mantel, hands locked behind his back, his face a study in stormy self-control. Mrs. Baines closed the door softly behind them, her presence lending gravity to the moment. She took her place in the corner, a silent witness as the drama of generations unfurled. Noah set the packet of letters and documents on the table, his fingers lingering on the ribbon. "You need to see these," he said quietly, searching Sir Alistair's face for some sign of recognition or regret. "My mother wrote to you," she tried. "These were left in the shepherd's hut, never delivered." Sir Alistair's jaw tightened. He hesitated, but then reached for the letters. The silence swelled as he read. With each page, the stern lines of his face softened. His hand trembled as he turned over the photograph of Clara, Evan, and baby Noah. The room was so quiet, Noah could hear the rain beating on the windows and the flutter of a stray leaf against the pane. Mrs. Baines stepped forward. Clara wanted peace. She wanted you to know your grandson, Alistair. But the estate, your pride, stood in the way. How many years lost for nothing? Sir Alistair's eyes shone, the steely glint replaced by something more vulnerable. I thought I was protecting this place, my name, our legacy. But I only built walls between us. His voice cracked. The confession rested from somewhere deep. I let her go because I was too proud to bend. Too proud to love her enough. Noah's anger flared and faded, replaced by a deep, aching sympathy. The pain in Sir Alistair's voice was not new. It was the echo of so many fathers and sons, so many stubborn hearts refusing to yield until regret was all that remained. Sir Alistair gestured to the table. And what else did you find, Noah? Noah took a breath and laid out the trust documents, the faded parchment and signatures testament to a promise made by his great-grandmother, Lady Pembroke. Wrenmoor West Paddocks, he said, tapping the name. It was meant for Clara's child. For me. It's not just a patch of land, it's the home of the wild herd. A silence pressed down on the room, heavy and expectant. Sir Alistair read through the documents, his brows knitting. Mrs. Baines stood by the hearth, watching the old man's resolve flicker and shift. Noah steadied his voice. I don't want to fight you. I came here to work, to help, not to take anything by force. But Raven's herd, they have as much right to this land as any name in your ledger. I can prove that now. I have to protect them. Sir Alistair pressed his hands to his eyes, the weight of decades closing in. When he looked up, something had changed, a crack in the armor, a willingness to face what he'd denied for so long. For years, I tried to keep Wrenmoor untouched by the world's cruelties. I failed my daughter. I failed you. His gaze fell to the flames. The herd. Your mother loved them, and so did your father. I cannot let them be destroyed for another man's gain. Mrs. Baines crossed the room, putting a gentle hand on Sir Alistair's shoulder. You still have a chance, Alistair. You can do what's right, before more is lost. Rain rattled the glass as the three of them stood together, past and present converging. The world outside was changing, and Wrenmoor Hall, long ruled by secrets and pride, was changing with it. A sudden noise broke the moment. Raven, visible from the swordroom's windows, stood just beyond the fence, his mane dark and wild in the rain, watching the house. Noah caught his breath. The stallion seemed to sense the storm inside as much as out. Noah stepped closer to the window, his silhouette merging with the stallion's outside. For a moment, it felt as if the walls between man and animal, past and future, were thin as mist. Raven tossed his head, stamping his hoof, a challenge and an invitation. Sir Alistair moved to Noah's side, his presence suddenly softer. When you see him, Raven, what do you feel? Noah searched for the words. He's not just wild. He's family. He protects what's his, even when the world tries to break him. The old man nodded, his lips tight. That was Clara's gift too. To see past fear and anger, to find the heart beneath. Mrs. Baines turned to both men. It's not too late to begin again. Not if you act now. As Raven disappeared into the gloom, Noah sensed a fragile thread forming, a bond not just of blood but of shared hope and guilt and promise. The choice ahead was clear, if not easy. The past would never be mended fully, but a new path could begin. The storm outside raged, but inside the swordroom, for the first time in years, the possibility of forgiveness flickered. And, with it, the first true alliance between grandfather and grandson, forged not by inheritance alone, but by the stubborn love that refused to die. Morning came with a hard knock on the front door, a sound that echoed through every floor of Wrenmoor Hall, sharp enough to send a jolt of unease down Noah's spine. He hurried from the old nursery, heart-pounding, just in time to see Giles Morland, the estate's land agent, stride into the grand foyer with rein still clinging to his coat and a self-assured air that didn't bother with courtesy. Giles's eyes flicked between Sir Alistair, Mrs. Baines, and Noah, assessing, measuring. He carried a slim leather briefcase and wore a smile too polished to be sincere. Sir Alistair. Mrs. Baines. Young Mr. Lennox. I'll get straight to business, Giles began, voice cutting through the morning hush. I've received formal notification from Ashdown Rewilding Trust. The herd of Exmoor ponies is being classified as a risk, too unpredictable, too disruptive to the rewilding scheme, and, frankly, a legal liability. The board has approved their removal. He opened the briefcase, sliding a document across the table. You have 72 hours. After that, the herd will be relocated by professional handlers. I expect full cooperation. Sir Alistair's jaw clenched, but he said nothing at first. Noah's hands curled into fists. Mrs. Baines's eyes narrowed, old suspicion simmering. Giles, sensing the tension, smiled wider, as if savoring victory. "That's not your call to make," Noah said, his voice low but steady. Giles ignored him. "It's the only responsible choice for the estate's future. I suggest you make the necessary arrangements, and quickly." He turned and left as abruptly as he'd come, boots echoing down the marble corridor. The hall felt colder when he was gone. A heavy silence followed, broken by Mrs. Baines' calm resolve. 72 hours isn't long, but it's not nothing. There's always something that can be done. Noah looked to Sir Alistair, who still hadn't moved. "We have more than a legal fight now," Noah said. "We need proof. We need a way to keep the herd here, permanently." Sir Alistair finally exhaled. "There is one way," he said. "If you can establish a valid conservation scheme, one that predates Giles' rewilding plan, you might have grounds to claim stewardship of the land. But you'd need evidence, documents. Something ironclad." Noah nodded, hope flickering through the fear. "I know where to start." Rhys met him in the stable yard, his face set with determination and worry. "I heard," Rhys said, not needing to ask. "They'll take the herd if they get half a chance." Noah told him about the trust documents, the shepherd's hut, the old conservation notes he'd glimpsed among his mother's things. "There's more in the coombe," Noah said, his voice gaining urgency. "If we can find Clara and Evan's grazing scheme, we could register the herd as an official conservation unit, protected by law and the trust. But we have to move fast." Rhys didn't hesitate. "Let's go." Together, they crossed the fields to the hidden valley. The mist was thinner now, but the sense of secrecy remained. Inside the shepherd's hut, Noah pulled apart old crates and searched under loose floorboards, the smell of damp wood and forgotten summer swirling around him. At last, he found a battered folder crammed between stacks of weathered journals. He opened it and scanned the pages. Detailed maps, photographs, grazing records, dates and signatures. In Clara's hand, a draft for the Wrenmoor Conservation Grazing Scheme, co-signed by Noah Lennox. There were charts of full berths, vegetation surveys, even correspondence with a university in Bristol. Rhys grinned for the first time all morning. This could work. Noah stuffed the folder in his satchel. "We have to get this filed before Giles's deadline." When they returned to the hall, Mrs. Baines was already making calls, her voice clipped and professional. Sir Alistair stood at the window, staring out at the paddocks, wrestling with old ghosts and new threats. He turned as Noah entered and took the folder. "This could change everything," Sir Alistair said, carefully reading through the evidence. "But we need legal help, and fast." "I know someone," Mrs. Baines said. "Priya Das, she's a solicitor, and she owes Clara a favor from years back. If anyone can get this through the right channels, it's her." They worked into the afternoon, scanning, copying, organizing every paper that could help. Outside, the sky darkened and the wind whipped up again. The tension in the house was palpable. Everyone moved with purpose, but also with the sense that one mistake, one delay, could doom the herd forever. Later, Noah slipped outside for a breath of air. He found Raven and the herd clustered near the edge of the Old West paddocks, as if they too sensed the coming storm. Raven watched him, every muscle taut, eyes reflecting something that felt almost human, a mixture of defiance and worry. Noah crouched by the fence, voice barely more than a whisper. "We're running out of time. But I promise I won't give up on you. Not now, not ever." He stood, heart pounding, and looked back at the manor. Light glowed in the windows, a fragile signal against the dark. Inside, Mrs. Baines and Sir Alistair were rallying their forces, old wounds and new alliances beginning to stitch together. That night, as Noah lay in the small bed beneath the eaves, sleep came fitfully. Dreams of fences closing in, of ponies running for their lives, haunted him until the first streaks of dawn. But through the worry and exhaustion, a flicker of hope remained. His mother had not abandoned this fight. She had laid the groundwork for a different future, a future that, if they could just hold on, was still within reach. 72 hours. It was a deadline, a threat. But for Noah, it was also a last chance, a window through which he might finally bring Wrenmoor's past and present into harmony, and save not only the herd, but the family legacy his mother had fought so hard to preserve. The clock on the hall wall ticked louder with each passing hour. Every shadow in Wrenmoor seemed sharpened by the countdown, 72 hours shrinking to 48, then barely a day. Noah barely slept, subsisting on cold tea and the kind of restless energy that only comes when the stakes are higher than fear. But now, with the battered folder of evidence, the trust papers, and Mrs. Baines's careful notes, they finally had a path forward. Priya Das arrived just before noon, sharp-eyed, brisk, and immediately at home among the chaos of urgent calls and stacks of paperwork. She sat up at the kitchen table, scanning documents, firing off emails, making the whole house feel as if the law itself was now on their side. "You're lucky your mother kept such meticulous records," Priya said, not looking up from her laptop. "Most people think they can win with charm or threats, but in my experience, what saves you is paperwork and signatures." She glanced at Noah. "You know this puts you in the middle, right? This isn't just about ponies, it's about land, legacy, and a whole lot of old grudges." Noah nodded, weary but resolute. "I can take it. I owe my mother that much." Priya smiled, approving. "Now, we're running a race. I'll lodge the conservation grazing scheme, but I also want a record of every bank transfer, every contract Giles and Ashdown signed, anything that looks suspicious. There's always a money trail. People who work this hard to get rid of wild horses usually have something to hide." It was Sir Alistair, more subdued than before but with a flicker of the old steel in his voice, who spoke next. "You'll have my support, Priya. I'll make my statement to the council. This house stands with Noah, and with the herd." Noah felt a shift in the room, a weight lifting. The old man's words were not just a promise, they were a signal. Word spread quickly through the village, through the neighboring farms and hamlets that ringed Wrenmoor. Soon, people began to gather, an old friend of Claire's from the village, a neighboring farmer who'd run Exmoor ponies as a boy, even a group of schoolchildren who'd grown up watching the wild herd thunder across the moor. On the day of the local council meeting, the village hall overflowed. Outside, the air was sharp with autumn, the crowd thick and humming with anticipation. Reporters from the county paper jostled for position, and at the center of it all stood Noah, trust papers in hand, Reese at his side, Priya ready with a folder of evidence. Sir Alistair, for once, did not stand aloof, but placed a steadying hand on Noah's shoulder as they entered the hall. Inside, the meeting unfolded in a blur of speeches and objections. Giles tried to paint the wild ponies as a menace, citing fabricated reports and selectively chosen incidents. Fiona Ashcroft from the Rewilding Trust, her voice cool, her tone legalistic, backed him up, repeating the line that all non-designated species must be removed to preserve the ecological balance. But Priya was ready. She stood, calm and clear, and presented the conservation scheme, complete with dates, signatures, and documented history going back years. Then she played her trump card, a series of bank statements and company filings she'd acquired through a friend in the city. "There are payments here," Priya said, her voice ringing through the hall, from Ashdown Rewilding Trust to an account registered to Moorland Land Services, owned by Mr. Giles Moorland. Further, the fencing contracts and drone services were billed through a third-party shell company that lists both Mr. Moorland and Miss Ashcroft as beneficiaries. A ripple of shock moved through the hall. Giles' face paled, then darkened. He tried to interject, but the council chair silenced him with a raised hand. "You'll have your chance, Mr. Moorland. But the council will examine these documents in full." The meeting shifted. Old boundaries broke. The voices of villagers and landowners rose in support, not only for the horses but for the right to have a say in the fate of their land. The air filled with clapping, shouts of "let the pony stay," and, most moving of all, the wavering voice of a farmer who read aloud one of Claire's letters to the room. She wrote, "To lose the wild ones would be to lose a part of ourselves. They belong here. They teach us who we are, if only we'll listen." Noah felt tears sting his eyes as he listened. Sir Alistair's grip on his shoulder tightened, not in command, but in solidarity. The final revelation came from Priya, who held up the legal trust documents. By the will of Lady Pembroke, the West Paddocks are held in trust for Noah Lennox, the direct descendant of Clara Pembroke. He is the legal steward. Any removal of the herd without his consent is in violation of this trust. The crowd erupted. Reese grinned, and Mrs. Baines, standing at the back, let slip the smallest, proudest smile. Outside, as people spilled from the hall and sunlight broke through the clouds, villagers gathered around Noah and Sir Alistair. For the first time since he'd arrived, Noah felt something like belonging. It wasn't just about heritage or law, it was about community, about standing up when it counted. The herd had become a symbol, not only of the moor's wildness, but of the stubborn hope that runs through families and land alike. Back at Wrenmoor, As dusk deepened over the fields, ravens stood tall at the edge of the paddocks. The herd gathered close. Noah watched them, a fierce protectiveness settling in his chest. For now, the threat had been pushed back. But he knew this fight was not yet over. In the darkening light, grandfather and grandson stood together, ready for whatever would come next, united not just by blood, but by the truth they'd fought so hard to bring into the open. The morning of the hearing broke sharp and cold, a thin frost painting the fields silver as sunlight crept over the moors. Noah hardly slept, his nerves wound tight. All night, he'd rehearsed what he might say if called, playing through every possible outcome. Still, nothing could prepare him for the heavy reality of what hung in the balance, not just the future of Ravenshead, but the fate of Wrenmoor, its legacy, and every silent story stitched into its land. The council chamber, usually reserved for dry debates and local planning, was packed tight. Villagers, neighboring farmers, and a handful of reporters crowded the benches, the air humming with anticipation. On one side sat Giles Moreland and Fiona Ashcroft, dressed in crisp suits and icy confidence. Across from them, Sir Alistair took his place beside Noah, Mrs. Baines, and Priya Das, whose organized folders and calm manner brought a steadying reassurance. Rhys stood at the back, his posture protective. The air outside buzzed with the sounds of the herd, Raven's distant call echoing through the morning. Noah took one last look through the window, grounding himself in the sight of the ponies gathered beneath the oaks. The hearing opened with procedural formality. Giles, ever the showman, launched into his prepared speech, painting the ponies as threats, dangerous, unpredictable, a hindrance to the rewilding project, and a liability for the estate. Fiona added numbers and jargon, their argument more bureaucratic than heartfelt. Their evidence, selectively edited drone footage and carefully timed incidents that showed the herd in moments of panic, not peace. But as Giles spoke, Priya rose, her voice even and unwavering. She presented the grazing scheme, the trust documents, the legal proof of Noah's stewardship, each page delivered with precision. Then, with a nod to Rhys, she produced the USB drive recovered from the crashed drone, its metadata forensically matched to the time and place of the wounded mare. The room leaned in, tension spiking. Council members, Priya began, the evidence shows that drone activity was used deliberately to agitate the herd, leading to injuries, not just to the ponies, but to the reputation of Wrenmoor itself. This was not natural behavior. It was manufactured for convenience and profit. She paused, letting the silence settle, then gestured to the gallery. Many here have watched these horses since childhood. You know they're not a threat. They're a legacy. As Priya finished, Rhys added his own testimony. I've worked these lands for 20 years. I've seen what happens when greed trumps sense. These animals aren't dangerous. They're defending their own. The danger comes from those who'd rather erase history than care for it. The chairwoman of the council nodded, then turned to Noah. Mr. Lennox, would you like to speak? Noah's heart hammered, but he stood. Every eye in the room seemed to press in, but he kept his gaze steady. Raven and his herd aren't just wild animals to me. They're family. My mother and father cared for them when nobody else would. My grandfather built this place with respect for the land. If you take them away, you lose more than just ponies. You lose what makes Wrenmoor, Wrenmoor. He paused, remembering the feel of Raven's breath on his hand. The warmth of the herd clustered close during the storm. They protect each other, just like we're supposed to. If they're gone, a part of all of us goes with them. The room stilled. For a moment, even Giles was silent. Then, Sir Alistair rose, for once letting the mask of pride drop from his face. For years I let anger and regret shape my choices. I pushed away my own daughter. I shut my doors on my grandson. I see now what it cost, this land, these animals, my family. He turned to the council, voice resonant and sure. I was wrong. Let the record show, Wrenmoor offers sanctuary to these ponies. I'll dedicate a portion of my estate as a permanent reserve in my family's name. Murmurs swept the gallery, approval, relief, and a kind of hope. Giles's eyes flickered with something closer to desperation now than confidence. Then came the final piece of evidence. Priya stepped forward with a security camera file, recovered from the North Stable's hard drive. The council watched as, late at night, Giles was seen at the gate, removing letters from the postbox, letters addressed to Sir Alistair, written in Clara's unmistakable hand. The weight of the proof was overwhelming. Even the council members, long used to rural politics and quiet compromise, looked shaken. As the hearing adjourned for deliberation, villagers pressed forward, thanking Noah, Mrs. Baines, and Sir Alistair. Rhys clapped Noah on the back, his eyes bright with pride. Outside, the autumn wind whipped through the trees, carrying the sound of ravens whinny as if in celebration. Minutes later, the council returned. The verdict: the removal order was suspended indefinitely. The conservation scheme was approved, the trust recognized, and the herd would remain, protected by law, by the will of the Pembroke family, and by the support of a community that finally saw what was at stake. The relief was dizzying. Mrs. Baines wept quietly. Sir Alistair, for once, smiled openly. Priya packed her folders with the efficiency of someone who'd won more than a case. She'd helped mend a family. As people spilled into the sunlight, Noah found himself at the center of it all, congratulated, embraced, finally and fully home. Yet, he knew the struggle was not entirely finished. Shadows lingered. Giles and Fiona would not surrender easily. But for now, Wrenmoor was safe, and the wild herd thundered free beneath the autumn sky. Wrenmoor Hall was never so alive as in the days after the hearing. The fields rang with laughter and voices, the sound of children visiting the paddocks, and neighbors dropping off baskets of bread and jam to celebrate the herd's victory. Even the weather seemed to bless the moment, crisp sunshine in the mornings, gold streaming through the oaks, a new calm among the wild ponies. Sir Alistair allowed himself to walk the grounds with Noah, listening to stories from Mrs. Baines about Clara's childhood, old regrets softening into gentle silences. But not every shadow had vanished from the land. Noah was up late one evening, reviewing the council's signed verdict at his desk in the nursery, when a strange noise pricked at his ears, a metallic clatter, sharp and deliberate, out by the old south gate. He slipped on his boots, grabbed his flashlight, and crept downstairs, careful not to wake the others. The air outside was chilly, the moon hiding behind ragged clouds. Noah moved quietly toward the fence. In the distance, the wild herd grazed peacefully, Raven's black silhouette standing sentry. But as Noah approached the south gate, his breath caught. Someone was tampering with the lock. The figure wore a dark coat, hood pulled low, but Noah knew that posture, that urgent recklessness. It was Giles. The gate clicked open, swinging silently on its hinges. At the same moment, a strange shrill sound erupted across the field, the unmistakable blare of a sonic whistle. Raven's head shot up. The herd jerked in panic, foals bolting in all directions. Lights flickered on in the hall. Noah broke into a run, shouting for help, but his voice was drowned by the chaos of hooves thundering over wet earth. Giles moved with practiced speed, darting through the gap in the fence. He held a small black device, the sonic whistle, high above his head, its wails slicing through the night. The ponies scattered, Raven charging straight for the open road beyond the paddocks. At that moment, a pair of headlights crested the rise, a cyclist, pedaling hard, unaware of the danger barreling toward him. No. Noah sprinted, vaulting the fence, mud flying. He reached the road just as Raven, wild-eyed and desperate, lunged for freedom, the herd close behind. The cyclist shouted, too late to stop. Noah threw himself between the stallion and the road, waving his arms, yelling, desperately trying to herd Raven back toward safety. Raven slid, hooves scrabbling on the slick tarmac, inches from disaster. At the last second, the stallion spun away, blocking the herd with his massive body. The cyclist's bike wobbled and crashed, but the man rolled clear, breathless but unhurt. Behind them, Giles tried to slink away into the shadows, but Mrs. Baines and Reese, roused by the commotion, were already calling for help. Flashlights swept the field. Noah knelt beside the cyclist, helping him up, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Raven stood close, trembling but calm, keeping the frightened ponies between himself and the open road. In the sudden quiet after the storm, Sir Alistair arrived, his expression thunderous. What happened? He demanded. Noah, breathless, pointed to Giles. He opened the gate and set off a sonic whistle. Tried to run the herd onto the road, to stage an accident. The cyclist, still shaken, looked at the group. I have everything on my dash cam. Your man opened the gate, then started the noise. It's all recorded. I nearly got killed. Giles, caught in the glare of a dozen torches, tried to bluster his way out. The herd broke loose on its own. I was trying to help. But the evidence was too clear. Reese retrieved the sonic whistle. Mrs. Baines called the local police. The cyclist, grateful and still trembling, replayed the footage for everyone to see. Giles unlocking the gate, setting the whistle, fleeing the scene. Sir Alistair watched, jaw clenched, as years of trust and old grievances boiled into cold, clear anger. You've endangered lives and betrayed your trust, Sir Alistair said, voice icy. You will answer for this. The police arrived quickly. Giles was taken aside, the device bagged as evidence. The officers took statements from everyone: Noah, the cyclist, Mrs. Baines, even Reese, who never once left Raven's side as the stallion calmed and regrouped his herd. By dawn, Giles was gone, the threat removed, at least for now. As the sun rose over Wrenmoor, a hush settled across the fields. The herd, though shaken, regrouped around Raven. He moved among the ponies, reassuring the foals, the night's terror replaced by the steady comfort of their leader. Noah stood at the fence, exhaustion and relief mixing in equal measure. For the first time, Raven walked toward him unprompted, nuzzling his hand, breathing slow and deep. Mrs. Baines, still in her dressing gown, came and stood beside Noah. "You did it, you know. You saved them. You saved us all." Noah shook his head. "I wasn't alone." Reese joined them, muddy and grinning. "The worst is over. With that footage and the police involved, Giles can't touch the herd, or this place, again." Sir Alistair appeared, older and grayer in the morning light, but with something new in his eyes, a quiet pride and peace. "We're not just a family by name," he said, placing a hand on Noah's shoulder. "We're a family by what we choose to protect." As the day brightened and villagers gathered to check on the herd, news of Giles's arrest spread. Fiona Ashcroft, ever the pragmatist, announced her trust would withdraw from the estate, in the interest of public relations. The threat had passed. But what mattered most was what remained: the land, the herd, and the people who had stood together when it counted. In the morning stillness, as Raven led his ponies back into the heart of the paddocks, Noah knew that Wrenmoor was finally, truly safe. 3 months passed, and winter melted into a gentle spring. The land around Wrenmoor Hall, once threatened by fences and fear, bloomed with wildflowers and new grass. Each day brought the calls of skylarks over the moors, the scent of wet earth, and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats across fields that were finally, truly free. Noah woke early every morning, drawn outside before breakfast. He had become as much a fixture of the estate as the ancient oaks or the weathered stones. The Exmoor herd had settled into the Old West paddocks, where Raven ruled with calm authority. Foals born in the stormy autumn now kicked and played under soft sunlight. Locals came often to visit. Students from the university's veterinary program wandered the trails with notebooks, and the Pembroke Sanctuary and Research Center officially opened its doors with a festival that filled the air with laughter and music. Sir Alistair had changed too. Though age bent his shoulders, his steps were lighter. He took pleasure in little things: a new foal's wobbly legs, Mrs. Baines' lemon cake, the way the house filled with guests and children. On the day of the sanctuary's opening, he stood beneath the family crest in the main hall, a framed photograph of Clara on horseback mounted just below the shield. The photograph showed a younger Clara, hair wild in the wind, her eyes bright and unafraid. Noah stood beside his grandfather, hands deep in his pockets, heart brimming with something that felt almost like peace. "Your mother would have liked this," Sir Alistair said, his voice rough but steady. "She always wanted the herd to have a place here, a real home, not just borrowed land." Noah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. That afternoon, they walked together to the woodland burial ground, a quiet glade at the edge of the estate where sunlight filtered through fresh leaves. Beneath a cluster of silver birches lay Clara's ashes, marked with a simple stone. Noah knelt to place wildflowers at the grave, remembering her stories, her laughter, the way she believed in him when no one else did. Sir Alistair lingered at his side. He slipped a small USB recorder into Noah's hand. "I found this among your mother's things. I thought you should hear it." Noah listened as the recording played, a message from Clara, her voice soft but clear, the accent of Wrenmoor never quite lost. "If you're hearing this, it means you've come home. I hope you found peace, Papa. And Noah, I hope you found your place in the world, maybe with the herd, maybe in the old house, but always with love. Remember that nothing here is truly lost, so long as you fight for it. If we can forgive, if we can stand together, we can make something lasting." The message faded, but its warmth lingered. They stood in silence for a long time, listening to the wind, to birdsong, to the memory of Clara that lived on in every corner of the land. Eventually, they walked back to the hall, shoulders nearly touching, not needing words. Inside, preparations were underway for a new beginning. The Pembroke Sanctuary had partnered with the veterinary school in Bristol to study wild equine behavior and conservation. Reese was promoted to head of sanctuary operations, leading tours and workshops for local schools, his gruff voice often turning gentle as he described the magic of seeing a wild foal take its first steps. Mrs. Baines became a legend in the village, her tales of the old days growing ever taller, her kitchen always filled with young volunteers and students eager for a slice of cake and a kind word. Noah divided his days, sometimes on horseback with Reese, sometimes poring over books, taking part-time classes in animal behavior and conservation, determined to honor the legacy his parents had left. The herd became his compass, Raven his silent partner in every effort to make Wrenmoor a place where wildness and belonging could coexist. As for Sir Alistair, the old man grew softer, more open with each season. He invited schoolchildren for lessons in the Great Hall, showed them ancient swords and faded maps, but always ended his tours at the paddocks, where he would watch the herd and tell stories of his daughter, of mistakes made and lessons learned. One spring evening, after a day of planting new hedges and helping a local vet with a sick foal, Noah found himself in Sir Alistair's study. The desk, once cluttered with paperwork and ledgers, was now clear except for a single document, Sir Alistair's new will. The old man handed it to Noah with a steady gaze. "It's time for you to read this. Wrenmoor's future is yours now, yours, and the herd's. I've named you as co-trustee of the sanctuary. The land will be protected, always." Noah read the words, his heart full. The weight of responsibility was there, but so was a deep pride, a sense that all the pain and struggle had not been for nothing. That night, as dusk fell and the sky blushed with the last light of day, Noah walked to the paddocks. Raven met him at the fence, the stallion's breath warm in the cooling air. The herd moved as one, flowing through the grass, the old and the new together. For a moment, the world felt perfectly balanced, every wrong slowly mending, every wound given a chance to heal. Noah watched as Sir Alistair, Mrs. Baines, and Reese joined him by the fence, all eyes on the ponies, living proof that hope, once nearly lost, could take root and thrive. As the stars began to show, Noah whispered a quiet promise to the land, to the herd, and to his family, past, present, and future. No matter what storms might come, Wrenmoor would endure. And he would stand with it, always.